Hello everyone and welcome back. We are going to be doing the actual summary of the Scum villain's self-saving system today. Full spoilers. Let's just get right into it, shall we? Okay. Before we get into the actual video, I just wanted to put this little note here in post. Throughout this entire video, I totally pronounce the main character's name wrong. So I think I say his name Shen Qing Chue, but his actual name pronounced correctly according to the pronunciation guide before I get murdered in the comment section is Shen Qing Cho. By the way, just a small correction there. It is Shen Qing Cho, not Qing Chue. Okay, there. I've said my piece. So, as I discussed in my non-spoiler version of this, the Scum villain self-saving system is divided into 5 sort of sections instead of into regular chapters due to the shortness of the chapters because it was originally a web novel and her chapters were a little bit short, so they just kind of scrunched them a little bit together. So at the very beginning of this book, it actually starts with the introduction of a different book called Proud Immortal Demon Way. So our main character, Shen Yuan, who we have dubbed this mystery character because we don't actually end up seeing what he looks like because he isn't alive for very long, to be honest. This guy fancied himself kind of a reviewer, so he would read this book, Proud Immortal Demon Way, in his off time, and he would just rip into it. It was basically about this guy over here, Lu Benghe, who was a stallion protagonist, which in terms of the book just means a guy who got a lot of girls. Like he ended up with like 300 wives or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically through vengeance he kills his teacher, who happens to be this guy over here on the right, and ends up banging a lot of chicks, and that's basically the entire story. Our main character, Shen Yuan, doesn't love this because he wanted a real story here. And there's little bits of evidence throughout the book that he seemed to be like a genuine fan. So on probably the latest chapter of Proud Immortal Demon Way, this book, our main character, Shen Yuan, ends up dying. The next time he wakes up, he's greeted by a couple of things. He's greeted by something we're gonna call the system. He is greeted by this man. So, our main character, as he dies, he wakes up. He sees a little bit of user interface, which is kind of funny, and he wakes up in the body of Lu Benghe's old teacher. This is a problem because in Proud Immortal Demon Way, Lu Benghe was known for being extremely vengeful because of the abuse that he received from his teacher when he was a young disciple. So him transmigrating into the body of the abusive teacher really does not spell good things for our man here. So at this point, it is when our main character, Shen Yuan, officially learns that he has transmigrated into the body of Lu Benghe's teacher, Shen Qing Chue. The only reason he really knows this is because the man that he ends up seeing right as he wakes up, who is Shen Qing Chue's martial brother, or the sect leader. You never really hear Shen Yuan's name ever again, sort of, in these books. He is now on from here after dubbed as Shen Qing Chue. You don't ever hear him say his normal name ever again. I think maybe once he does, but it's not in this volume, so who cares? Our man here isn't that relevant, so we're gonna put him in the not yet relevant section. His name is Wei Qingwan. He has some sort of relationship with the original Shen Qing Chue that nobody really knows about, but it's not really relevant right now, so we're gonna push them all the way over here. They're on the Kangchong Mountain sect, and the first thing he tries to do, our main character, is he tries to find his disciple Lu Benghe. And this is actually where Shinwan first runs into some issues, because the system is quite petty in this book, and is basically the reason that everything happens the way it does. So the system almost works as sort of a game. So Shen Qingchui, or Shenwan, at this point knows that he's transmigrated into this book that he had been reading. So instead of being able to change things on a whim, as he thought that he could now that he's living this new life, he is greeted with the system that prevents him from doing certain actions so that certain plot points can come to pass. So by the time his martial brother over here leaves the room and asks him to bring Lu Binghe over so he can see where he is in the story, the system is already preventing him at that time from acting any different than the original teacher would have, to, at least at this point, to get him to sort of get familiar with the system. Lu Binghe walks in. He looks like absolute trash at this point. And it is here that our main character discovers that he's already suffering abuse from his teacher. He can't change that right now because he is under certain restrictions from the system, but he gets a beginner quest right after from his martial brother, who he kind of dubbed as an NPC at this point because he's not really that relevant. Gives him a beginner quest to go and unlock this, they call it the OOC function, that will let Shenyuan to act just as he would like. Before they end up going onto this beginner quest, we run into a couple of other things. So Shen Wan over here wants to test out his body a little bit, and he ends up going to the forest where he ends up seeing Lu Binghe for like the second time, and another one of his students. Her name is Ning Ying. Actually ends up causing a lot of trouble for Lu Binghe in this moment specifically. So as a young disciple, he was quite bullied a lot. So as Shen Wan is over there hiding in the bushes watching his two disciples go about some chores, he witnesses a scene where Lu Binghe is basically bullied into losing his mother's last gift to him before she had passed away. And this is all basically the fault of this chick right here, because she's doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut in any way, shape, or form. But Lu Binghe is devastated. He can't find the item. He leaves. Shen Yuan, using his newfound powers, finds the item, keeps it for later, because maybe it'll be useful. Another reason why Ning Ying is on this sort of page here is kind of relevant, because throughout this first book and all of these Scum villain books, Shen Yuan is always comparing the original plot to the new plot of the Scum villain self-saving system, as what we'll call it, his new life. So Shen Yuan is actually really excited to see Ning Ying, because she was Lu Binghe's first wife in his harem of 300 women. After that, they go onto the carriage. He ends up taking a lot of his disciples with him. Shen Yuan sits in the carriage while they go ride horses down to the village where this beacon quest is, after everything that happens in the forest. Lu Binghe actually ends up sitting in the carriage with Shen Yuan because he was being bullied, so trying to take pity on the poor child, he let him into the carriage with him while bullying the system to kind of make it seem fair, because he can also get punished. And that's another big thing with the system, is if he doesn't do what the system wants, he loses points, which basically can count down to his own death. The second section, we get something that I like to call the Skinner Demon encounter. So they make it down to the village where he has his beacon quest, and Xinyuan doesn't really know what he's doing, but he kind of goes along with, this is almost like the tutorial for the system to get Xinyuan into the role of Shen Qingchui, into this world that he just was transmigrated into. So it ends up being an investigation into this thing called the Skinner Demon that has been killing women from town to town and leaving them like skinless somewhere. Shenyuan tells the students to do it because that's why they're there, to do things for him. And he ends up kind of walking around doing other things until it is revealed that Ning Ying Ying has gone missing. Upon realizing that she has gone missing, our main character takes his disciple with him, and they end up finding her in this old abandoned mansion before they are inevitably knocked out. When Xinyuan wakes back up, they end up defeating the Skinner demon using plot armor. He basically convinces the demon to try to go after his disciple Lu Benhe, but plot armor is too strong, so something entirely random happens and Lu Benhe is saved. After the mission though, Shenyuan ends up leaving for seclusion into these sort of spiritual caves. He's kind of a little bit on the fence with his own powers. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but he also doesn't want to die, because he thinks it's fairly inevitable that Lu Benhe, his student, is going to come after him in the future and kill him. So after finally being able to unlock the OOC function after that beginner quest, he can do whatever he wants now. He goes into these caves to try to get a little bit more powerful. But he isn't in there for very long before he ends up running into, quite aggressively, this guy over here. He is also quite relevant, so he gets to stay on the board. This guy is Liu Qingge, and he had gone into a chi deviation into the caves that was supposed to kill him in the original book, but Shenyuan, finally unlocking his OOC feature, can do whatever he wants now, ends up saving his life, which changes a lot of more events going forward. So he's fairly relevant in this book and a few other ones coming up. Liu Qingge is kind of freaked out with this, because in the past, he is actually known as one of the Peak Lords. Something that I forgot to mention at the very beginning is who Shin Qingchu kind of was. He is the master of Lu Benhe because he was one of the Peak Lords of this sect. There are like 5 peaks or so that make up this one sect of cultivators. Shin Qingchu was the leader of, they were kind of more into the arts, where Liu Qingge was the Peak Lord of the War Peak. So for him to kind of go crazy into a cave and die of a chi deviation wouldn't actually have been that weird. But they both knew each other, or at least Liu Qingge knew Shen Qingchui previously. So him being saved was very weird for him, because he had thought, or he had experienced murder plots against him by Shen Qingchui in the past. So it really wouldn't have been that much of a stretch if he had been murdered by Shen Qingchui in the caves. So it kind of freaks him out a little bit. And in the original, it was suspected that Shen Qingchui had killed him in the caves, just didn't save him. So after Shen Qingchui gets out of the caves, after that whole ordeal, he stumbles into a demon invasion onto whatever peak that he was closest to. The demons destroyed their only form of like transportation to get across the peaks, because there's like these bridges and the demons accidentally broke the bridges, so they're kind of on their own at this point. Everybody on the peak is like a disciple except for Shen Qingchui, and this is when another one of Lu Benhe's previous wives comes into play. Her name is Xiaohualing. Shen Xingjue is super excited to see her. He keeps like throwing a ton of glances at Lu Binghe, like, look at this hot chick, and he just could not give a crap. But she comes in, destroys the bridges, and she tries to make her invasion a little bit more friendly, and she's like, oh, it's not like an invasion or anything. We just wanted to be here to have like a friendly like martial arts competition. We're gonna do 3 1v1s, and we're just gonna showcase our fighting skills. So Xinwan goes first, beats the crap out of whoever he fights. And instead of getting to do the next fight, the system prevents him from fighting anymore because it requires Lu Binghe to have a turn in the fight. So Xinwan is forced to put Lu Binghe into one of the fights, but he doesn't want to yet after the first one because Xiaohualing herself ends up in the second duel. This is where we meet another one of Lu Binghe's previous wives, probably one of the most famous from what Xinwan says about Proud Immortal Demon Wei. And this is actually Liu Qingge's younger sister from a different peak that only accepts girls. She was famous to be like the most beautiful of them all, so she always wore a veil over her face. Her name is Liu Mingyan, and she ends up volunteering for the second fight against Xiaohualing, which she ends up losing against. So at this point, it's 1-1, one more fight, and Shen Qingjue has to send in Lu Binghe. So at this point, Lu Binghe isn't overpowered at all, even though that's what the book had propped him up to be. He is still a disciple with a ton of faulty training because of all the bullying he had, and he barely ends up winning this fight. But the catch is that his opponent happened to be famous for his poison called Without a Cure, literally. And in Xinwan's worry for him, he ends up jumping in front of Lu Binghe at the end of the fight, after it was over, by the way, because he did win. His enemy just wanted to get back at him. Xinwan ends up jumping in front of him to prevent Lu Binghe from getting hurt, which gives him the chance to get poisoned without a cure. Except there is a cure, it's just one that Shen Qingjue doesn't want, because the only thing that cures anyone in this series or in Proud Immortal Demon Wei was having sex with the main character. And he doesn't want to do that, so he's gonna pass for now, at least. Reinforcements finally arrive. Liu Qingge shows up, and they clean up the rest of the demons and get them off their peak. And the next section of the book starts at 9, actually. Xinwan kind of senses that Lu Binghe has kind of gotten a little bit attached to him. We see a little bit of Lu Binghe's thought process throughout this first book, and he is kind of confused, but then he totally flips a switch midway through to being super affectionate towards his teacher. Because for years he had been abused by this guy and had no kindness at all, but having finally received kindness in general, he just kind of latches on to Xinwan, I'm gonna say, to differentiate between him and the previous teacher. And at this point, he has become so attached to him that he's like cooking for him in the morning. So it's getting a little bit interesting there. There's a brief section where the other peak lords, his older martial brother, and Liu Qingge, among some other martial arts, end up coming in, and they talk to Xinwan a little bit about his condition. We learned that without a cure, it doesn't necessarily like incapacitate him or try to actively kill him. It's more like a chi stopper. So like every so often he will like try to do something with cultivation, and it may or may not work. So it's more of a gamble in life-threatening situations when he wants to use his powers. But after they leave, night completely falls, and Shinwan ends up waking up in Lu Benghe's dream sequence, which is weird for him because originally Shin Yuan was. This is weird for Shin Yuan because originally Lu Benghe was supposed to pull Ning Ying into this dream with him, like the person he trusted the most. So he knows something must have already changed within this whole plot, where his most trusted person is no longer his, like, Shime, and is now his teacher. So Shinwan tries to guide Lu Benghe through his dream sequence, already kind of knowing what's happening, that there is this older dream demon by the name of Mengmo. We're going to put him over here. He's not really that relevant, so we're going to put him on the not yet relevant side, but we'll just put him here for now. He had sort of invaded Lu Benghe's dreams looking for his successor. So Shinwan, all he knows is he has to get Lu Benghe to a very specific spot in the dream so that he can meet Mengmo, and then that's it. And he can eat out, which is exactly what happens. They end up walking through a couple of dream sequences. Mengmo kind of like is impressed with Lu Benghe, pushes Shinwan out of the dream, and have this conversation about who Lu Benghe was. So Mengmo kind of reveals to Lu Benghe, and Shinwan already knows this because he's read this whole book. So he's kind of just waiting for everything to happen. Lu Benghe is actually half heavenly demon, which is the most powerful type of demon that there is. So Mengmo, looking for an apprentice, found Lu Benghe and is like trying to coerce him into like being his apprentice. They basically have this long conversation in the middle of the night. Shinwan already knows what it is, but he wakes up in the morning disturbed because he's having visions of getting murdered by Lu Benghe when he comes back to seek his revenge after what he thinks he has to do to him. Well, not necessarily thinks, because the system is forcing Shinwan to finish certain plot points, which includes Lu Benghe's master's biggest betrayal against him was by pushing him into a place that's called the Endless Abyss. And he actually ends up getting Lu Benghe to move in with him, like slightly adjacent to him, in like in the Peak Lord's like little cottage, because Lu Benghe was literally like sleeping in the shed. So they grow a little bit closer throughout this third section. The fourth section, though, is where the plot really starts kicking in. We are greeted with the arrival of the Immortal Alliance Conference. This includes the 4 major sects, including the Mountain Sect, and the only one that's like kind of relevant that needs to be mentioned is Huanhua Palace. You'll hear more about them in the next books, but they all come together and they basically just fight beasts in a forest for points, and whoever gets the most points wins. Shin Qingchue also ends up meeting Huanhua Palace's old master. This is also significant. Him over here in this little corner. He's not relevant right now, so he's going to be put off to the side. But the old palace master is actually very connected to Lu Benghe's story. So Lu Benghe, the half-demon, his father is the heavenly demon. His mother was a cultivator from this old master's sect. She had died doing something. They say in the book that the demon had killed her. The one that she had gone with, Lu Benghe's father, had ended up killing her. But she, right before she died, she sent Lu Benghe down the river in like a basket, and was found by the woman that he actually refers to is his mother, who has passed away. And that's the one that we end up seeing in the dream sequence. But he becomes more relevant later. In the Immortal Alliance Conference, none of the masters can participate, but they have their students in there. So Lu Benghe is participating, and they're kind of watching everyone through like I'm just gonna call it magic. Shenwan sees his student and he sees that he's basically being followed by a ton of incompetent people, because why the frick not? Because he's really nice in this stage of his life before he goes a little bit crazy. But then they start seeing these creatures, these demonic beasts, enter into the force and kill these young disciples. So that is when the ambassadors have to intervene and jump in to try to save all their disciples from being killed. It is during this time that we meet someone actually very relevant to this plot as well. He's chilling down here. In the fight trying to save these disciples, we end up meeting this man right here, Shang Qinghua. He, at this point, Shen Yuan is super sus of him. Not only is he super sus, he knows why he's super sus of him, because in the original book, this Peak Lord, he's like the Peak Lord of administration, so he's kind of pathetic. He was known for being a traitor to his sect, to like a demon, like another demon lord. So Shinwan's already there, like, giving him the side eye, because he knows that this guy is probably the reason why all the demonic beasts are set about. As they're fighting the beasts, they've all kind of reunited. Lu Benghe with this master and this like random tag-along dude, in a sense, when the Endless Abyss finally opens. So with the Endless Abyss, this is already weird. Whoever or whatever Shen Yuan thinks is supposed to come out, according to the original plot, does not come out of the Endless Abyss to like basically coerce Lu Benghe into like his daemonhood. The person who comes out instead is actually Shang Qinghua's like demon lord, Mo Bei-jun, which is this guy over here. He ends up coming out of the Endless Abyss, fighting Lu Benghe, forcing him to reveal his half-demon nature, which triggers the system into making Shen Yuan push Lu Benghe into the Endless Abyss for the next like 5 years. So the conference ends actually, and Lu Benghe is proclaimed as dead, which sucks. It's interesting because you realize that Shen Yuan, our like new Shin Qingjue, has actually grown like a lot of affection for this upcoming revenge seeker, I guess I should call him, and he's like grieving for like a year. He grieves for a long time, even though he knows he's probably gonna come back and kill him. Shen Yuan finally gets like a new friend at the end of section 4. Shin Qingjue, after he kind of gets out of his little bit of a slump there, he is fully acknowledged that Lu Benghe is going to come back and probably going to kill him, because he's done the one thing that he really didn't want to do, but he had to because of the system, by throwing Lu Benghe into the Endless Abyss to basically be like eaten alive by all of these demonic creatures and claw his way out. He ends up confronting Shang Qinghua, this guy down here, because he thought he heard him drop an F-bomb when the demon, like when the demonic creatures were coming out and when Mo Bei-jun showed up. Basically, he's sus because nobody else speaks English or knows that kind of verbiage, so having mistakenly heard that, he ends up going to Shang Qinghua's peak, visits him, and it is revealed that Shang Qinghua is also a transmigrator, but he isn't just some normal dude that got pulled in that happened to read the book. Shang Qinghua is actually the original author of Proud and Mortal Demon Way. So not only is he in this terrible world everyone's gonna get murdered, he is gonna get murdered anyway because he got transmigrated into the spy who gets killed by his like demon king. So they're kind of in a similar situation, and they sort of come together a little bit, like they Honestly, not really, because they kind of bully each other a lot, especially Shin Ching Choi does, because he's pissed at the author. And they go on this little mini adventure to go find a sundew mushroom seed. It ends up being around Huanhua Palace. They meet another guy there. He's not irrelevant. We're gonna put his picture up anyway. This guy, he just ends up patrolling around his sect because he belongs to one sect as well. He participated in the Immortal Alliance conference. His name is Gongyi Xiao, actually. He becomes relevant, okay? I put his picture up for a reason, guys. But they end up going to find this seed, and all this stuff is leading up to everything that happens in the next book, so this is kind of a weird spot, honestly, to end it. But they go into this cave, they end up opening up this really weird lake, and they find this seed, where it's finally revealed why it's so important to Shenwan and Shenwan. It's revealed why the seed is important, because Shenwan knows he's gonna die, or at least he's anticipating getting murdered by his student Lu Benhe. So he remembers from reading the books this random paragraph that Xing Xinghua had once written about a plant that would grow like a secondary body for someone. Like, all you need to do was die, and then your soul would inhabit this like vegetable secondary grown, like it looks like a normal body, but it's grown like a vegetable. So to find this, they end up going into the forest, meet Gongyi Xiao, and they end up finding the lake where it is, and they see this creature. We don't formally meet him, so I didn't put his picture up, but he is actually fairly relevant. Who seems to be feeding off of the energy of the sun, moon, dew mushroom seed. And Xinyuan, in his sporadic infinite kindness, his plot-changing kindness, as I will say, takes pity on the creature and leaves the creature like the last seed after he took like the rest of them instead of killing him, which is not irrelevant but will be relevant at towards the end of the series. Anyway, thank you guys for being here. That was my little summary of the Scum Villain Self-Saving System Volume 1. I wanted to kind of put these little pictures up here this time because I thought it might be useful. Thank you for being here. I stream sometimes during the week on Twitch. If you have any random comments or you want to talk about these books, come and see me. It's a fun time. I'm not very good at what I do. So you'll probably just have fun out watching me fail, but thanks for being here. I hope to see you in another video, and like and subscribe if you want to. Bye!